Did a post asking if you guys would want to hear me do some tips and tricks on theater. I've had a lot of people come to me and ask me different questions, as well as me just learning some new things that have helped me with shows. So I wanted to share those with you guys because a lot of people were very enthused by my Tech Week bag video that I had posted, which I will link down below. But that video really helped a lot of people get ready for Tech Week and get ready for their performances. So I wanted to go ahead and throw out some tips and tricks that you guys can use if you ever feel like they are needed. So let's get started. Okay, so the first one that I'm going to give you is double water bottle. Now what this means is having 2 water bottles that you can keep with you, especially during Tech Week. I think that's mainly when I start using 2 water bottles on each side of the stage. So that way, if I have to be on this side of the stage for a scene and I don't have time to run all the way around to the other side to get my water bottle where it's placed, I have one right next to me. This was really helpful, especially for those who don't have a lot of time to stay backstage or hang out. I know for SpongeBob, I did not have a lot of time to just chill. I was always on the stage, always in a song, and I think the most time I had was maybe 1 song and then I had to jump back in. So a lot of the times I didn't have that much time to just run downstairs and grab my water bottle or go to the other side of the stage. So I would highly recommend having 2 water bottles labeled with your name on it, so that way people know that it's yours, and having it on one side of the stage and then having the other on the other side of the stage. This really helps just make sure that you're staying hydrated, and it just helps you not to feel stressed about your vocal cords not being hydrated before you go on for a song. The second thing that I want to mention is a mic belt, or a belt that you can put your mic on. I am currently working on a production of Annie Jr. as their stage manager, and we've had a lot of trouble with these orphans having their mic somewhere where it will not get in the way of their dancing, movement, or anything like that. They are very physical because they're always stomping around, fighting with each other, moving. It's pretty crazy. So what I've realized from this production and from these kids having their mic, it's really important that you have something either underneath your costume or something around your waist under your costume that you can put your mic belt on or in. For SpongeBob, I actually had a belt that I wore, not necessarily a mic belt, but a regular thin strap belt, and it was leather, so it was pretty thick. And I wore that, and then I put my mic on that belt under my space costume because it zipped up, and I really loved it because it was nice and snug to my waist and it never like slid down. And I'm not a huge fan of mic belts with the ones that actually clasp and like you have to pull it in order for it to like tighten. But if I have a costume that is a little bit more form-fitted, that usually helps me a little bit more. For Shrek, I did wear a mic belt for most of the shows, and it was nice because my costume was more form-fitted, so it was more comfortable. But for SpongeBob, my spacesuit was a little bit more airy and roomy, so it was really nice to have a belt around my waist so that way my mic would actually stay snug on my back. So I would definitely recommend either asking for a mic belt or just getting a nice belt that's pretty thin, pretty small, but easy to use for your mic to stay on underneath your costume. The other thing that I want to mention is a show cheat sheet. I haven't really used this as much, mainly because I've just gotten used to knowing my cues and just getting it in my head so that way I don't have to look at a piece of paper, but I know a lot of people who find this very, very helpful. So what this cheat sheet does is basically you go from the very first scene all the way down to the end of the show, and you basically list off the scene, where you start for that scene, what props you need to have, the cue line you need to have to come into the scene, the whole 9 yards. I am actually seeing this more often with especially like the middle school shows that I've been working on. I'm working on Annie Jr. and watching these kids, they have their cheat sheets either in their pocket of their costume or backstage with me, and they come and check it and look at the different scenes. Now obviously for younger actors this is really helpful, and it helps them to kind of get this idea of, okay, I need to start getting an idea of how I need to get to this scene or get to that scene. For me personally, I don't necessarily use this. As I've said, before, but I do like to use it in a different form sometimes. It always depends on the show, how much I have to be on the stage, and if I have a lot of props. Sometimes I can just lock it in my brain and I'm good to go, but sometimes I do have to have a reminder with me. So I would say that this is a really great way to just know your cues and your entrances and to just keep yourself on cue, because when the director is expecting you to be there for a cue or costume change or with your prop and you forget it, it can hurt you. It truly can. And it can feel disappointing when you don't do what you're supposed to do. So that can definitely be a step towards locking it in your brain or getting that muscle memory going of remembering those cues and everything that you need to know. So this next one, actually, I came to find this really helpful, and I kind of found it on my own, but it's not super crazy. But mic tape is a huge deal. Like, mic tape, I can't even stand it, but I've learned to deal with it. It's not like one of those obstacles that I struggle with anymore. I think the biggest thing that I've learned is how to place my mic tape so that way it's comfortable and my mic doesn't pull, or if I turn my head a certain way, it doesn't like pull me or restrict me. That's always been my biggest problem with mic tape, is where to place it. For Shrek, I actually learned this to be useful, but what I like to do, of course, is to place it on my right ear, and then I place one on my cheek that's long enough so that way it sticks to my cheek. I do often will put one right behind my ear on the wire so that way this guy right here that goes around my ear doesn't pop off or, you know, go up and then over my ear and then it comes off. I've had that happen before. And then I take the wire and I actually run it to the nape of my neck, and I go down and I put tape right in the middle of my neck, right on the wire. I found that this is helpful because when I turn my neck, usually people will put the tape right here on their neck, but when you do that and you have to turn your head the opposite way of where it is, it'll pull and it's very uncomfortable and very restricting. I put tape on the back of my neck for Shrek, and when I did this, I've had no trouble turning my neck or looking up or looking down. It was just very comfortable because it was right in the middle and not all the way on one side. So this next one is a cue line book. I did kind of touch on this on my Tech Week bag video, but for the cue line book, I actually have a notebook that I keep with me for every show. It's my purple one, and inside of it, I listed out from Act 1 to Act 2 and each scene. So it's similar to the cue cheat sheet. So it's similar to the cue cheat. Oh my gosh, I can't say it. The cue cheat sheet. There we go. The cue. Forget it. It's similar to the other thing I just mentioned, but what I do is I write down all of my cue lines and who says them in order of my lines, because I want to make sure that I am actually paying attention to what the person is saying and what my cue line is. So what I usually like to do is I like to go over my cue lines as much as I can, so that way I'm able to remember what line comes after it and how I'm supposed to say it, what I'm supposed to say. That always helps me, and I think the cue by cue of each line really helps me to pay attention to the conversation as well. This next one is very important, especially for girls. Undergarments. Now, I don't want to get nitty gritty, but all I have to say is I love my leotards. I have worn one for SpongeBob. I have worn one for Shrek. I've worn some in the past for different costumes. Some of them I can't wear a leotard because of the costume or how it's made or where it shows my skin or whatever. But I have found that having a leotard under my costume is just one of the best things ever. A lot of people that I know wear like boy shorts and tank tops, which is fine, but I stopped doing that because I just found it very uncomfortable, especially the boy shorts, especially if they're like very spandex and tight, so they kind of like ride up and then it's just uncomfortable. Especially with a tank top as well, it can like come up and it's just really uncomfortable and you have to like take off your costume so you can fix it. I found that having a leotard on really helps because it's just one piece and it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't ride down or ride up, but I do suggest having a leotard because leotards are just really comfortable and they just help in general. All right, this is a given. This is definitely a given, but I have actually tried to reinforce this in my life recently, and that is no dairy, no soda, no caffeine. Easy to it. I don't drink caffeine in general. I don't drink dairy in general. I don't drink soda in general. general. Now, of course, there are some limitations and some restrictions that you have to make with this one. I would say that with dairy, I do have to be careful. I am lactose intolerant anyways, but I would say that I can definitely tell a difference when I've had dairy and then I go to sing something. I can definitely tell a difference of how it feels and how the sound sounds. So I would say that, especially with soda and caffeine, it really dehydrates your vocal cords, and then you just get this really bad sound, and then it's just not great. And then the same thing with dairy, it creates too much mucus, and then it just is not a great feeling for me. So I would say staying away from those things when you're in a show specifically will really help you in general. So what I like to do to get really hydrated vocal cords is to use my vocal steamer. I love to steam my vocals. Even when I'm not in a show, it just really makes a difference of how my vocals feel, how my sinuses feel, and it just makes everything feel so much better, and it just hydrates your vocal cords, keeps you well. So I would say that's a big thing that I love to do and that I would highly suggest is a vocal steamer, but doing it on a daily basis, especially when you're in a show, it really makes a difference and it helps you stay well and well hydrated. All right, this next one is of course a given, and I just touched on this, but I'll touch on it a little bit more. It is studying your cue lines to enhance your lines. Now, what I mean by this is that when you are studying your lines, it's so important to understand who you're talking to and what they're saying. What I like to do is I like to understand what the person is saying before I speak and creating a reaction or something to respond to with that, if that makes sense. So what I mean is if somebody says, Ashley, your dog is dead, we just had to put him down. I don't have a dog, by the way. I would probably think of a reaction that I can pull out of that spurs on the response that I do have. So if I say, oh my gosh, are you kidding? I would have to create a reaction from the line that was just said in order for me to respond in the way that I am. This ultimately helps me to remember my line better because I remember the reaction to the line and then I remember how I'm responding to it. So I would highly suggest creating this system and each line that you have. Of course, that might not be the case for every line, but it definitely will help you in a lot of situations where you're in a conversation with somebody or a group of people and you have to remember certain lines and specific reactions and things like that. That definitely helps a million times. All right, this next one I actually learned this past summer when I was in SpongeBob, and I'm very glad that I did because it's one of those things that I never really thought about, but I knew that it would be a good idea to start taking responsibility for it. But it is doing vocal warm-ups before your rehearsals or your tech days or your shows. Now, of course, this sounds like pretty self-explanatory because you do need to do vocal warm-ups anytime before a show. But what I mean is not all theaters will have specific time frames laid out for people to do vocal warm-ups together. I did SpongeBob and every day we would just jump into music. We would never start off every rehearsal with vocal warm-ups. We had to ask for them. And a lot of the times we just didn't have time for it. So they were like, if you want to do vocal warm-ups, you need to do it before you get to rehearsal. What I've usually started to do now is while I'm on my way to rehearsals, which is usually about a good 25-30 minutes from my house where we rehearse, I like to turn on a vocal warm-up video. That's one of my favorites. And I do my vocal warm-ups in the car while I'm on my way there. That really helps me to actually take the time out to do it because I can't do anything else. I'm driving, so I have to do something. And so once I get there, I'm already warmed up and it's right at the time that I need to go into rehearsal. So it's a win-win. So I would definitely say doing your vocal warm-ups before rehearsals are really important. And even if they do vocal warm-ups before the rehearsal, that's great because you can get some extra warm-up. But if you're already warmed up and you don't want to push yourself, you don't have to do it. That's the situation that I found myself in, and I think that it's very beneficial. All right, and the last one, I did touch on this in my Tech Week bag video, and I want to kind of go into more detail of why this is important to me, but I love having an emergency kit or a toiletry bag that I keep keep all of my personal items in. And I don't want to get nitty gritty with it, but I do want to say that it's so important to just keep like Advil, like Benadryl, like stomach pills, any necessities like hair ties or tissues, deodorant, things that you really feel like you might need in a situation where you might sweat or you might feel nauseous or you might just need something that you don't automatically have on a daily basis. I love to keep this for rehearsals and tech weeks and shows because it makes me feel secure and that I have all of my stuff that I need to have just in case something happens. There have been so many times where I have not needed Advil or tissues or deodorant or anything, but other people have been like, hey, I have a headache. Can you give me some Advil? Or do you have Tylenol or anything? And I'll have it. So it's always nice to have it even if it's not going to be used by yourself, but for others. So it's just really nice to have to help some people out. Well, that is all I have on this list. If you guys want to know anything else, if you have any questions about anything specific that I did not mention in this video or any of my previous videos, let me know, comment, tell me. I want to answer those questions as best as I can. Some questions I may not have the answers to, but I can definitely try my best to answer them. I really appreciate that you guys care about my input and the advice that I give and the tips and the tricks. I'm still learning. I know you're still learning. We're all in this together. Cue the High School Musical little dance right there. So the fact that we get to do this together and to learn more about theater and acting and tips and tricks like this is so encouraging. So have a great day and I'll see you soon. Bye guys!